and welcome to What's New in the Australian Curriculum version 9. This is a webinar series, and today we are presenting on privacy and security with a special focus on years 7 to years 10. So our session today, we're going to spend just 5 minutes having a brief overview of what's happening, have a little bit of a look at the curriculum links, and then we're going to spend the bulk of our time looking at activities in years 7, 8, and then 9, 10 that cover the curriculum content for the privacy and security strands of the curriculum. And then we're going to give you a little bit of a wrap up. So this webinar is actually part of a series of other webinars that we are delivering. And you can see that we're already at week 5 here. So I strongly encourage you to especially make sure that you're across the introduction webinar, and then have a look at the other content and data representation, and looking at algorithms that have come before, as well as coming back and checking out what we've got in data collection, analysis, digital literacy, and in project space. I am Courtney Weaver, and I'm a lead educator at Grok Academy. Prior to working for Grok, I was a high school teacher in the digital technologies and computer science space for 5 years. And prior to that, I actually worked as an IT consultant for 15 years. Drew?
Hi, my name's Drew. I am an ex-teacher. I used to teach in central schools all over New South Wales. So I've taught everything from K to 12, primarily in the digital technology space. And we wanted to go into what we're going to sort of give you a brief overview of the things that we're covering in this session. We're going to look at this new concept of privacy and security because it hasn't existed in its current form in previous versions of the Australian curriculum. We're going to give you some examples of learning experiences that you can implement into your class, focusing on privacy and security. And we're going to give you some ideas to run an assessment in your school. So what's in privacy and security? You can see there that we've kind of defined what privacy is and what security is. They are two separate things. The idea is that privacy is related to all the things about your identity and data that's being kept on your identity, whereas security is about protecting that data. So while the two are interlinked, they are very distinct and separate ideas. And version 9 of the curriculum has added this in recognition of the vast amount of personal data that's stored and shared online. And you can even look at things like all the data breaches that you hear about in the news, getting more and more, and they're increasing more and more, that there's really an understanding that students need to be aware of the data that's stored on them and how that's being kept online. So when we're looking at privacy and security, we're really starting to place an emphasis on the idea of ownership, which we look at down in the junior years, all the way up to the Australian privacy principles and appropriate use of data in year 10. So let's look at what we're going to do when we're planning to teach privacy and security. It's broken down into 3 parts. It's broken down into what do I teach? That's the content descriptions that you can see in the curriculum in version 9. And they are explicit statements about what needs to be taught. It's going to organize that into a learning sequence, or you're going to organize those into a learning sequence, but those descriptions must be taught in your classroom. How do you address those descriptions? Well, that's where we begin to look at the elaborations, and each content description has elaborations that are attached to it. And they're going to give you ideas on how you can implement it. They themselves are optional. You are allowed to use your own judgment if you believe there is something that you think is more appropriate in order to meet those content descriptions. But the elaborations are a really good place if you don't know where to start and you don't know how to address those descriptions. The elaborations can provide you with more detail on that. And then the last part, and the last thing that we're going to look at, is the assessment, the achievement standard. And the achievement standard determines what will need to be addressed. And when we're talking about privacy and security, we will start to show some of the key points from these achievement standards from the year 7, year 8, and the year 9, year 10 descriptions so that you can see exactly what we're going to be addressing and how we're going to know that students are learning about privacy and security in these particular areas. So I'm not going to speak too much to this slide because we don't need to read a wall of text, but you can see here that we have privacy and security all the way from foundation up to year 10. And we've broken it down by color for privacy and security. So you can see you can see that we have a lighter blue and a darker blue. But every stage has some kind of content description that does address an aspect of privacy and security. If we look at that a little bit more generally, though, you can see here that, again, we're using a black color and a blue color to distinguish between privacy and security. But starting in foundation, we talk about personal data and ownership. In year 5 and year 6, we talk about passphrases and reuse, and we begin to look at the digital footprint that a student will have when they're online, all the way up to year 9 and year 10, when we look at cyber threat models, we look at vulnerabilities, and we start to critique the Australian privacy principles.
Version 9 of the curriculum has renamed the ICT general capability to digital literacy. And I think that's a really important change to highlight the importance of this as a literacy and not just a skill that students need. And one of the things that has been done is that there are explicit alignments to where the general capabilities are best taught. And one of the general capabilities is around managing digital privacy and identity. And obviously that aligns perfectly with the privacy and security content that we are teaching in digital technologies. So this is explicitly taught by the content descriptions that we are that we have in digital technologies in the privacy and security substrand. But it is something that should then also be reinforced across other subject areas, anywhere that students are using digital tools that might collect data about them. So this substrand here is, this sub-element here is of managing digital privacy and security, is one that is looking at controlling and shaping their digital identity and recognizing the implications of having a digital footprint. And so that aligns really, really strongly with those year 5, 6 things about the digital footprint. And, coming along from foundation, helping them to understand the data that they own that is about them, and all the way through to our year 10, thinking about those Australian privacy principles and what is appropriate for an organisation to keep. So there is also a link to one of the other digital literacy elements, sub-elements, and that is around protecting content. So this aligns really strongly with the security aspect, whereas the previous digital literacy sub-element was closer to our privacy ones. This is more to do with our security strands. So looking at how students are protecting that data that is about them out on the internet. So this one is looking at their good practices on password policies. And again, something that, as whilst we have the opportunity to teach it explicitly in digital technologies in this instance, it is something that should be reinforced across all subject areas, particularly with the increasing number of different online tools that students are using for their schooling, and having an iPad or a laptop computer, that it's really important that they're learning and practicing great cybersecurity practices right from this when they first get online.
And the fact that you can see that they're in the general capabilities now, as well as being added to the curriculum in 7, 8, 9, and 10, should really show you how much of an emphasis and how much of an importance is placed on these ideas of privacy and security.
So we're going to move now into looking at some of the activities that you can use, or some of the specifically looking at the content descriptions for years 7 and 8 and the activities that you can use to teach that. So the first content description that we're looking here, you can see, again, when we look to those breakdowns, that from year 1 onwards, there is one content description that specifically aligns to privacy and one that specifically aligns to security. So the first one on the page here is our security-focused content description, and that is looking at multi-factor authentication. So just a brief, for those of you that might not be familiar with the term multi-factor authentication, is when you're having many different ways to verify your identity. So usually we'll look at it that you'll have something that you know, which could be something like a password, something that you have, which could be a physical device, for example, when you have an authentication app on your mobile phone, or something that you are, which would be a biometric thing like your fingerprint or your Face ID. So we want students to understand why this provides them with greater amount of security than just having a password alone or one single factor. Our second bullet point is the one that focuses on the privacy aspect. And this one is looking at getting students to consider the permanence of their digital footprint. They would have covered that in year 5 and 6, but now it's asking them to look at it more critically and assessing whether or not the data that is being collected about them by specific applications is actually essential for that application to do what it is supposed to do. So we can have a look here at the elaborations, Drew.
Yep. So the elaborations for these particular descriptions, again, we wanted to break them down a little further into kind of distilling them into what they really need to be addressing. And as we said before, they are optional, but if you want to know how to address these particular content descriptions, the elaborations are where we need to look. So in your classroom, this could look like explaining the different types of authentication we use. How do we do that in the classroom? How have students done that in their own personal lives? It's a really good chance to have a discussion in your class about that and see whether we use passwords, MFA, biometrics, all the things that Courtney spoke about before. They've looked at good password habits in 5-6, and that can be a really good opportunity to rediscover and reiterate on some of those ideas that they would have learnt. The other one that we're speaking about is phishing. So the idea that we want students to be aware of what phishing attempts look like. We want them to avoid becoming victims and falling for scams, whether they're online, whether they're phone-based, whether they're through your email. We really need students to examine their own use of different technologies and different things online in order to apply some of these concepts and really drill in that they have experienced this in their own context. If we look at the next one, you can see there that when we're talking about looking at digital footprints, examining what data Google and apps like Instagram have on you through their settings. The question that you can ask your students is, how much data does somebody actually need to have on you before you would be uncomfortable? You could do this in your own class and say, if I asked you for all this detail, your name, your address, your phone number, your first pet's name, at what stage would you want to stop? At what stage would you say, no, I don't want to give you that? And then we can look at that and whether that information is being pulled through things that they're using online. You can also use social media to identify what personal data is being shared and with who. And we can create student surveys that look at some of those. Am I actually asking you for too much information ideas? Do I need to ask you for as much information as I am? And then the other one that we've put there are, what are the risks of using free Wi-Fi? A lot of students, especially if they don't have reliable phone service, are happy to hook into free Wi-Fi networks. And what type of data and what type of different things do they give up in order to access that free Wi-Fi service? So if we're doing that, we're going to look at a series of different ideas to address this. Courtney?
So one of the things that we've got is an unplugged activity that you can access through our resources page on our website. We also actually do have class sets of these cards, which if you contact us support, then I'm sure we can figure out a way to get one to you. And so these are, it's a cybersecurity card game. And it's a great icebreaker activity for the beginning of these discussions about what information is good to share. So this is something that you could use with year 5, 6s as well. So then you could reiterate it by bringing, when students come into year 7 and 8, to restart those conversations again. So this shows students a series of different information. Could it be their mobile phone number, their login and password, their address, their pet's name, all of these kinds of things that they might be asked to share online. And then it asks them to consider whether or not they should share that information freely or not. And it has a little description as to why they give the answer. So when you think about something like a pet's name, in and of itself, it's fine to share the pet's name. However, we also know that a lot of people use their pet's name in their passwords. So it might be fine to share it, but then to consider your good password habits by not including information that you do share freely online with other people in your passwords. So the next activity that we've got, ABC News recently published this fantastic article. It's actually using information that was already available on Have I Been Pwned, which looks at how your digital footprint, how your email address has been leaked online, and along with other little pieces of information about you, that is creating quite a complete picture about you online. So, Drew, do you want to just flick over into what that looks like? So this is the article, and you just simply enter your email address in here. We've already done one earlier. So the portrait starts with your email address, and then it gradually, as you go through, various different breaches have, and this is customized for your individual email address. So various different little pieces of the puzzle. So you can see that my email address was first leaked, and then a couple of passwords have been exposed by specific data breaches, and some of my usernames as well. So then there was a Kickstarter breach where more email addresses and passwords are exposed. And gradually, more and more parts of the puzzle, IP addresses. So now people know where my computer is. There are physical addresses. People know now where I live, my phone number, social media profile, my date of birth. And you can see that through 15 breaches, almost every piece of the puzzle, well, every piece of this puzzle has been leaked about me. So we can see, I think, when it comes to this, is a great one. My email has been linked 15 times, which fits with the 15 breaches. And then through those 15 breaches, 12 passwords have been exposed, 6 usernames, 4 IP addresses, and 3 geographic locations. So it really shows you how in only 15 breaches, and that's just the ones that are known about, this entire jigsaw puzzle about my life has been able to be collected. And I think this is a great opportunity for students to be really challenged about what they're sharing. But also this is an awesome opportunity to demonstrate the data interpretation concepts in the curriculum as well, because this is an excellent graphic. This information was all available in Have I Been Pwned, but it's a list and it's not very engaging to read. But this really does show you a powerful image about your digital footprint, and how all of these parts can be used in identity theft quite easily. So this is another good opportunity to have a discussion with students as well about strong passwords and not reusing passwords across multiple accounts. So we often think that we'll use a good password for I'm going to have a really strong password for my bank account, and that's an obvious thing to do. But we often don't think about having strong passwords on things that are less important, like maybe say the Kickstarter campaign. We don't think that that has that much information about us, but it might have just enough. And one thing is leaking from one thing, and then another is leaked from another data breach. And pretty soon all of those things together can make a very full picture.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, so it's a good opportunity to have that class discussion, but also to have a look at what tools are out there that could help you limit the amount of data that's being collected about you by each of these sites as well. I think we have some links in the resources about that.
Yeah, and if you do run it in your class, and obviously students who have newer email addresses, if they might put their school email address in or whatever, there might not be any data. One of the ways to get really interesting data that is still relevant to them is to get them to put their parents' email addresses in if they know. Because obviously, depending on their age, they might not have been caught up in many breaches, but if they would put their parents in who have had email addresses for many years, that can really be an image that still relates it back to them. The other activity that we had is going against everything that we've just spoken about not putting your data online. And it's the idea that we're going to review our location data and our ad preferences. So obviously, anytime your students sign up to a service, and the adage is that if a product is free, then you're the product. But as they sign up to services, all this data is being kept on them. Most places will tell you what data they're keeping on you. And we do have a Google guide linked at the end of this presentation that you can go to review what Google's keeping about you and clear what Google keeps about you and change it so we can manage that footprint that Google's keeping on us. But what I've got over here is a screenshot from my phone with the significant locations feature turned on. So significant locations, just as you're using your phone, I have an iPhone, but as you're using your iPhone day to day, and I believe there's one on similar to Android, it tracks where you are and it tracks where you visit to form these locations that you visit a lot. Now, I normally have this turned off. For this presentation, turned mine on, and you can see here that from the 16th to the 25th of May, it recorded 63 records. 63 times Apple took my location and said, I'm just going to keep hold of this for the moment. And that from there's 3 particular places that I visit the most. That's good for me because I work from home, so I'm not traveling about. Students, though, will probably have a lot more. They'll have had it on for a lot longer, more than the 11 days that I've had mine on for. And this is data that's being kept on them. From this, if someone was to get my phone and to know my password, they could see where I live. They could see where my children go to school. They can get all this data on me, and I've done absolutely nothing. I've just been using my iPhone for it. So by showing students how to deactivate and change their preferences to turn off the significant locations, to change the way that Google keeps my data, to look at what Instagram is providing me, all these online services that I'm using and interacting with regularly, we can start to change the data that they're keeping to form a less complete picture of what it is that these companies are keeping on students. The other activity that we have is our information privacy and security course. Now, this links to this is part of a broader picture that we'll get into in a moment, but our course actually has a look at, and I do have a link here. This course from Grok actually does keep track, it exposes to students the idea of sharing passwords, MFA, and phishing, right? And the course has different activities, like, for example, this spooky SMS one where people receive texts and they're given a scenario that they've received a multi-factor authentication text on this simulated phone to their simulated fist bump account. And in fist bump, they've got to go and view the text from fist bump, and it says, oh, here's your verification code, which is something that students are very familiar with. And then they say, oh, what do? I've got this code, but I didn't sign into fist bump, and my conversation with my friend told me that. I need to change my password. This is a measure that we need to take in place when we we have things like this appear. So they've then got to copy the link here, go back to their browser, go to the place, and they get told their email address. All of this is provided. And if I just copy and paste it, we can see here that I get sent an email, and I can go in and simulate the steps in a way that gets me to change my password and to look at how things like multi-factor authentication can protect my password if it's compromised. There's other bits that look into phishing. There's other bits that look into all those sort of different digital footprints. There's different privacy and security ideas that we're examining in digital technologies, and give them a way that they can do it in their own pace, but also with you as the teacher monitoring them. There are little formative accessible tasks built in so that students can check their understanding of these concepts. And we do recommend that you use these with your own teaching. It can be used to reinforce those ideas that you're looking at when discussing what it is that students are keeping in their Google accounts. And it's a really good way to interleave your own teaching with these practical examples that don't require them to use any of their real data online or any of their real email accounts.
We find that students really find these courses very engaging because they're realistic to them. They're using phones, browsers, the social media. It's our fake made social media, but they're familiar with the concepts and they can see how it is directly relevant to their own life.
Yeah, exactly right. Because this is one of those really easy ways to contextualize it for students and to make it more powerful when you're explaining these ideas to them. So that info security course is part of a broader progression of different privacy and security focused courses that we do offer, starting off with info security that has a more primary focus, all the way up to an info security that has a more 7 to 10 focus, cryptography, which looks at the idea of how we encode and encrypt text, images, audio data, which is more digital systems based. So it's a good way to look at some of those digital systems content descriptions. But it does look at having students identify vulnerabilities in each. So we can use it to tie in some of these concepts, starting off focusing on the student themselves and then moving it out more broadly as they're using digital systems. And we'll have a look at another couple of these as we sort of get into the more year 9 and year 10. But specifically for year 7 and 8, that information security course and the cryptography course are a really good place to start.
We also have these standalone problems, which some of these are unplugged activities. If they are on platform, you don't actually need to sign students up in a subscription at all. They're accessible immediately from the platform, and it's called a cyber hunt. We offer these. There's 1 year last year, and there's about to be a whole new series of these created for this year as well. So these are designed to be challenging brain teaser type activities. They should be done, as that hook to get students into these concepts. They're meant to be fairly short activities that you can just run to get the discussion going. Or you could set it for homework and then have the discussion in class. So some of them are similar again to the ones that Drew just showed in the information security course, looking at different aspects of privacy and security, and then a few more there that are closer to our digital systems things, where we're looking at the encryption and those sorts of tasks as well. So I strongly recommend using those.
They do also have fully worked answers. So there is a teacher guide available with each problem that completely explains what we're looking at, how it fits into the broader picture, and gives you fully worked solutions so that you can understand the question as well. If you're looking at the question going, "Ooh, I don't know where to start."
I think we're looking now at the achievement standard, and it's kind of scary, I think, when you look at the achievement standard and it's this massive wall of text, and really trying to break it out what is relevant for this particular topic. So for our privacy and security substrand, we have the students by the end of year 8. So remember that this is at the end of a 2-year period. They should be able to identify cybersecurity threats. So that is if you threw some phishing emails or things at them, that they should be able to determine that it's suspicious and why they think that it's suspicious. And then also that students should be able to manage their own digital footprint. So demonstrating that they're able to make changes to their accounts and lock their accounts away to protect their information and to be selective in what they're sharing with other people. So that's the achievement standard as it relates to year 7 and to the end of year 8 for these concepts.
So let's put year 7 and 8 aside now and start to have a look at year 9 and year 10. If we have a look at the new additions of the descriptions to the curriculum, you can see here, again, we don't have any that we've replaced from version 8.4 to version 9. These are all new additions, but we have 2, one around security and one around privacy. So we have our develop cybersecurity threat models and explore a software user or software supply chain vulnerability. And we're also looking at applying the privacy principles to critique and manage the digital footprint that existing systems and student solutions collect. Again, we're elaborating on what we did in year 7 and 8 and taking it to that next level and giving more context and looking at how it fits into the broader ecosystem. So
if we take a look at that, the privacy focused content description, one of the things that we could do is to look at the Australian privacy principles and then evaluating the solutions that the students are building themselves as to whether or not they are meeting those requirements. We can also look at how we can the recommendation algorithms that are used by the services that students use themselves, such as Netflix, Spotify, Amazon books, and things like that. So how do those services, and some of those are based internationally, so it's an interesting thing to look at the way that they may or may not align to the Australian privacy principles, and how comfortable do students feel with the differences between what the Australian privacy principles expect and what these organisations are collecting about them. I think the last one is a really great one, in that looking for examples in the community where the Australian privacy principles apply. So looking at the sorts of things that they are doing in their own lives. What loyalty programs are they a member of, and what did they have to give information up for? And just looking at the various small local businesses that are collecting information, perhaps when they're entering a competition, through to the larger organisations, the social media platforms that they're on, etc. The next content description with the cybersecurity threat models, one of the ones here is about using data flow diagrams. I think that one is, we want to make sure that we're considering how data is moving through a system. I don't think we should be too worried about all of the crazy rules around formal data flow diagrams at that point. So, but the idea that you're looking at where is data coming from and where is it going to, and because those are points where your data is vulnerable to somebody attacking it. So the threats on your home network, so bringing it back to where students are most comfortable and they understand how, when their internet goes down, I'm hoping that by the time they're in years 9 and 10 that they know where to go to reset their router. So then looking at their home network and what they can be doing. The software-based vulnerabilities, so looking at if they're using something like WordPress and making sure that they're careful who they give admin access to. And the last one, I think, is the one that is the scary sounding one in the content description, and that is the software supply chain vulnerability. So really what that's talking about is the fact that you might connect multiple different systems to each other, third-party systems, and each of those are going to have credentials that are needed to authorize them. So being careful at each of those points that each of those things that you're interacting with are secure. I think the other word that in this content description that's a little bit foreign to people is that of a threat model. So a threat model is really looking at what we call the CIA triad. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and just looking at how you can manage the balance of those three things to ensure that people are able to access the things that they need, but that the things behind the scenes that make that possible are protected as much as possible. So we've got a few different courses. Oh, Drew.
No, so you're right. We do have a few different courses that address this, because as we get more abstract, it can be harder to give definitive in-class discussions, in-class things that students are used to. So what the Grok courses do, and what the Grok platform lets you do, is it lets you do the same type of courses that they were doing in year 7 and year 8, but it gives them all that contextual data, those contextual experiences in a imaginative way that's more than just reading words off a screen and reading a textbook. So the first course that we wanted to look at is the Web Application Security course. And I've got that loaded up over here, where students look at, they're given an example as part of the larger course, where they've got to look at how cookies can change, whether the bonus others tickets and how different vulnerabilities and how different security processes can interact in their website. That's what I was after. So they've been asked a question: what date are they in Sydney? And we can see here that it's a members only event, but students are given the chance down the bottom to change a cookie that is reloaded. That lets me then come into the bonus others page. I'm given dates that I can enter, whereas if I did that same page without the cookie, we see it's only available to members. That's a hard thing to simulate in class, but by using the platform to do it, students have clicked on that accept all cookies and, what is all this about? Students often click on that without looking. So by giving them an example of, hey, this is what that actually does, and explore that software, that web browser software that they use every day, it can get them to think of it in a way that they've never really seen it before. And that's just one part of the course. We look at URL inconsistencies. We look at examining the HTML and JavaScript and CSS of a page. We look at GET request parameters. There's a whole heap of things in there that encourages students to think about security as they begin the design of any web application. So it can interlink really well if you are getting them to create their own web application, which plays into the data representation substrand of the curriculum. The other one that we have is the Grok Digital Forensics course. So this has students investigate a breach from the fictitious school of Grok. They've got to look at how that breach occurred. They're given access to virtual machines, and they've got to make inferences on how that breach occurred, what data can be used, and what the fictitious school of Grok should do. And specifically inside this course, they also look at explicitly the Australian privacy principles. And again, this is one part of the larger course, but we do look at what data the company or the school is getting, who's complying with the principles. They're given scenarios that they've got to do. So again, it's a practical way for students to explore these very abstract concepts that they may not have been familiar with. Teachers can also explore it and do these in their own time or with their class if they want to live a little bit more on the edge, if they've never experienced these before either. So there's teacher notes and there's solutions built into every single problem that they do. And it can be a really good way for you as a teacher to brush up on some of the things that you may be unsure of.
I found that the narrative of having this fictitious data breach that had happened and having to find out what had gone wrong, I found that really engaging when I did this course, just to test it out when I first started. So I strongly recommend this one. It's a bit of a different one as well, because students have to use virtual machines in order to be able to investigate all of the different parts of the breach. So it is a quite a different course for people that have used Grok before, and I strongly recommend giving it a go. The next course that we have, I can't actually show you. Unfortunately, it's because it is coming soon, but that's exciting because you're hearing about it here first. We are releasing, hopefully in semester 2, 2023, a course that's specifically around threat modeling. Now, this particular course is designed to be no code, fairly non-technical, just get students to understand the concept of threat modeling and the idea that threat modeling is something that you do every day. Just when you consider leaving your house and whether or not you're going to lock the door behind you, you are actually doing a threat modeling activity. When you're considering the risks of what might happen from a security perspective, and taking an action to prevent something from happening, you're doing threat modeling. So this is designed specifically to meet this content description, because we understand that threat modeling is something that isn't a term that's used, and we really want to make sure that it is made a little bit friendlier to teachers and to students. So these 3 courses are all part of a learning progression that Drew mentioned earlier. So in years 7 and 8, they might have done the InfoSec and the cryptography course. And this is a sample progression that you could take students through, in when they can go through the web app security, network security, then when the cyber threats course comes live, to take that, then digital forensics, take a look at our Unix course, and then finally moving on to another course that's coming out in semester 2, which is monitoring and securing networks. This would give a really in-depth look at the privacy and security and digital systems aspect of the Year 9 and 10 curriculum if you went through all of these courses. But there is certainly no need. There are no real prerequisites. You could take them in any order and that would be fine. It's just an idea to give you the background knowledge, and it would depend on your own teaching and what else you're doing with your students in classes as to whether or not you might jump some of these. Another activity that I thought would be great to examine the privacy principles is to use something from the Project Zero Visible Thinking Toolkit from Harvard University. So this is something that I use quite a lot in my classes to introduce students to fairly hefty concepts and you don't really want to give them like, oh, read this web page that explains the privacy principles. So one of the ways that you could do this is that you're setting up stations. You could just pick, so there were 13 Australian privacy principles, but really the ones that there's about 4 or 5 that are the most important ones, I think, from a student perspective on understanding. So if you could set up 5 stations and you could have the privacy principle there plus a scenario that was a system or a data breach that they could look at, and then get students to read those 2 things and write down some things that they think about when they read those 2 things. Do they think that the Australian privacy principles were met, or do they think that the organisation had done something wrong with regard to the Australian privacy principles? Or do they think that the Australian privacy principles were not strong enough or are too strong and restrictive. And then they will move around the room to the next station, and they can build and elaborate on what the students before them have written. They can then also connect ideas. So they have a new idea, they write it down, they're like, this relates to one of the other ones. And soon they're creating a mind map of all of the different things. And it's a collaborative mind map. So they're getting the experiences of everyone else in the classroom. So this can be a really good way to help students, once you've kind of introduced the idea of the privacy principles, to really go a bit deeper into what they mean.
And again, as we did with Year 7 and Year 8, there is a, how will I know that students have learnt these ideas that we've covered? And there is another big wall of text there. But pulling it out and extracting what it is that we actually want is we need students to model cybersecurity threats and explore a vulnerability. And they need to apply the privacy principles to manage their own footprints. Those are at the core of it, what it is that students need to be able to demonstrate by the end of Year 10. So
you could send them a proposed system. You could give them an idea of a system to investigate and comment from both the threat modelling and the Australian privacy principles. So you could assess both of those things together by having students evaluate a particular system, either a real one or a proposed one that they, either fictitious or one that they might be building themselves.
And the idea that this privacy and security applies to everything and is in the general capabilities is you could hold, as an idea, a privacy and security awareness event. So you could run a week of activities in the school and the community. You could involve retirement villages. You could involve the broader community as a whole, take out a paper ad in your local paper to raise awareness of how to investigate and manage a digital footprint. So students could create videos and information sheets demonstrating some of those ideas that they've learned. They could even do that in TikTok style, short snippet videos. They could create web pages to play into that data representation. The choice is up to them. As a teacher, you would say, I would like you to demonstrate this particular content description, and I would like you to be able to present it at an assembly or help the elderly people at the local retirement village know what their email is keeping track of about them and where those data breaches that they learnt about have occurred. So it also doesn't need to be limited to just digital technologies. It can be run as a more FATE style of thing, or students can just create those and have them in their own classroom. The choice is up to you, but it's a really, really good way for students to take what they've learnt and then be able to show it and demonstrate that they understand it all, because it's a lot to take in. But if they can create some kind of summative, accessible project, it can really help them distill down their understanding into quite an easy final product. So everything that we've mentioned today, we do have links for, and we've got them here, as well as a couple of other things that we felt were valuable if you do want to continue to explore the privacy and security ideas. Interland and Have I Been Owned and the Australian Privacy Principles quick read poster, and that reviewing your Google privacy setting ones that I spoke about earlier. So please feel free to jump into any of these and explore them and see what it is they're trying to do and upskill yourself so that you can upskill your students.
And as we mentioned at the beginning, this is just part of a series of webinars. So if you are keen, do come back and check out our data collection and analysis or digital literacy seminars. And then there's one the following week, which will be available on designing and assessing digital technologies projects. Before we go though, I do just want to make sure that you're aware that Grok Academy is now free for all Australian schools. So we've got, it was announced in October last year that there's a 5-year partnership between Grok and WiseTech Global to make learning digital technology skills available to every Australian student teacher, parent, and adult learner. So our mission is to educate all learners in transformative computing skills, knowledge, and dispositions. And the partnership with WiseTech removes the financial barrier to schools in using our resources, as well as allowing us to expand our team to continue to support schools, teachers, and learners. If you do have any questions at all, feel free to contact us at our support email, help@grokacademy.org. You can find our website at grokacademy.org or scan the QR code here and it'll take you there. Thank you so much for your time today. And please do not hesitate to contact us if you need any further information about anything that we've presented today.
Thanks, everyone.